You will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Foreign Minister Ahmad Attaf is on a working visit to New York to take part in a ministerial meetings on the Palestinian issue regarding Palestine's full membership request at the United Nations. And the Algerian government and the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, have agreed on the organization of the 4th edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair scheduled for September 2025. And the Polisario Front stressed that the exercise of the Sahrawi people of their inalienable right to self-determination is the only path towards a peaceful and lasting solution of the Sahrawi issue ahead of today's consultations on the UN mission for Western Sahara. And more airstrikes have been carried out by the Israeli occupation forces against various parts of the Gaza Strip, killing and wounding scores of Palestinians. And those were our major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. Entrusted by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community abroad, Ahmad Attaf, is paying a visit to New York to participate in a series of ministerial meetings on the Palestinian issue ahead of the examining by the UN Security Council of the State of Palestine's application for full UN membership. A communique issued by the ministry indicated that Mr. Attaf is also expected to participate in 2 high-level debate sessions at the US UN Security Council on the role of youth in the face of security challenges in the Mediterranean region and in support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Refugees in Palestine, UNRWA. The minister will also take part in a meeting of the General Assembly as part of monitoring the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, particularly those linked to the access to sustainable energy. And Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov has reaffirmed his country's will to continue to work to develop a strategic partnership with Algeria. Speaking to newsmen following a meeting granted to him by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, the visiting Russian official had this to say.
I had the honor of being received by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, despite his busy schedule. I conveyed to him the greetings of the Russian President. We attach great importance to the relations between Russia and Algeria. President Abdelmajid Tebboune made an official visit to the Russian Federation last June, during which we signed a declaration on deep strategic relations, in addition to the important security coordination that already exists between our 2 countries, knowing that Algeria is currently a non-permanent member of the Security Council. The Russian government is driven by a great willingness to promote the Algerian-Russian partnership to a higher level. I thank President Abdelmajid Tebboune for his rich and constructive interview, and we hope our bilateral relations will further progress.
And that was the statement of Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov. The Algerian government and the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, have agreed on the organization of the 4th edition of the Intra-African Trade Fair scheduled for September 2025. Jamal Salmani has more.
The sign-in ceremony was presided over by the Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arabawi in the presence of members of the government, the advisor to the President of the Republic in charge of trade, Mr. Kamal Razig, members of the diplomatic corps accredited to Algeria, and the former Nigerian President and Chairman of the IATF Advisory Council, Mr. Olusegun Obasanjo. Following the signing ceremony, the Trade Minister, Mr. Tayyip Zitouni, said that Algeria's organisation of the event reaffirmed Algeria's position as a driving force for development on the continent and its role in establishing peace, security and stability through economic integration. In a joint press conference made with the former president of Nigeria and chairman of the IATF Advisory Council, the Algerian minister said the organization of the fourth edition was mainly due to Algeria's position on the economic scene and the positions expressed by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, which show that Algeria is a country of peace, a country that supports everything that contributes to stability through economy and trade. He said that the organization of the fourth edition is part of the implementation of the strategy of President Tebboune aimed at strengthening the African integration and promoting economic cooperation among the countries of the African continent and establishing a strong economic base to achieve sustainable development and the well-being of the peoples of Africa. The minister added that the fair will be a political, historical, cultural and economic event par excellence, stressing that Algeria was a Mecca for revolutionaries, thanks to its contribution to the liberation of many countries on the continent, has for decades mobilized its financial resources to accompany, support and help many African countries in various fields. Mr. Zitouni recalled that the value of Algeria's exports to the African continent amounting to $2.7 billion, including $650 million in non-hydrocarbon exports. For his part, Mr. Obasanjo stressed the importance of such economic events in strengthening the inter-African trade and called for the acceleration of the continent's integration into the economic value chains of today's world. He also stressed the importance of taking advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area to increase the volume of inter-African trade, which has fallen from 20% to 14% of the continent's total trade with the rest of the world in the past 2 years due to the effects of the global health crisis.
And Mr. Zitouni has co-chaired with the former president of Nigeria and chairman of the IATF Advisory Council the first session of the Intra-African Trade Fair 2025 in the presence of the Secretary General of the Continental African Free Trade Area, Wamakili Meni. And the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Yusuf Shorfa, has received the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Belarus, with whom he examined ways and means of consolidating bilateral cooperation and partnership. Miriam Burshi has the details.
During their meeting held in the presence of the ambassador of Belarus to Algiers, the two officials discussed several topics of common interest, notably strengthening cooperation in the agricultural sector. Earlier, the Belarusian diplomacy chief met with the Algerian Speaker of the National People's Assembly, with whom he discussed the importance of reinforcing parliamentary cooperation and the friendship groups between the parliaments of both countries. Regarding the world's current issues, the Speaker of the lower house of Parliament said the world cannot talk about peace in the Middle East without allowing the Palestinian people to exercise their legitimate right to establish an independent state. As for the Western Sahara issue, the Algerian official highlighted Algeria's concern on the inalienable right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination. He added that Algeria is working hard to resolve issues related to organized crime and illegal migration by trying to address the roots of this phenomena. The Belarusian official, for his part, indicated that his visit to Algeria aims to develop bilateral relations in all fields of common interest. He also insisted on the need to update and increase the number of agreements and memoranda of understanding between Algeria and Belarus to pave the way for a solid and strong partnership. The Belarusian diplomacy chief also announced the upcoming creation at the level of the lower house of the Belarusian parliament of a commission devoted to the development of parliamentary relations with Algeria. The Belarusian official also highlighted the convergence of views between the two countries in terms of their positions on several international questions, notably the support for peaceful solutions to crises around the world and to international justice.
And earlier, the Minister of Industry and Pharmaceutical Production, Ali Aoun, has received the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Belarus, with whom he discussed cooperation opportunities in the field of industry and pharmaceutical production. The two officials discussed the importance to develop cooperation in the manufacturing of tractors and buses and the mechanical industry in all sectors combined. The two sides also discussed cooperation in the field of pharmaceutical production, notably the production of medicines for the treatment of chronic diseases. Mr. Aoun called for the creation of a joint commission before the end of May to discuss cooperation and expertise exchange. The Belarusian diplomacy chief, for his part, hailed Algeria's privileged position in Africa, stressing that it makes of her an active and strategic partner for the Republic of Belarus in Africa. And here in Algiers, the 28th edition of the Energy Day took place in the presence of the Energy Minister, Mohamed Arkab, under the theme for a more flexible energy model by 2035. The Commissioner for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, as well as several Algerian executive and experts in the field of new energies, renewable energies and energy transition, participated in this year's edition, which coincided with Knowledge Day. The study day was marked by several conferences run by Professor Shamsuddin Chatour, among other experts in various areas of the field of energy. And the Minister of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, has received the Managing Director of the CGG Group, specialized in geophysical and geological services, with whom he discussed cooperation opportunities in the field of hydrocarbons and the mining sector. Majid Mila has the details.
A communique released by the Ministry of Energy and Mines indicated that the two parties discussed the state of cooperative relations between Sonatrach and the CGG Group in the field of hydrocarbons, as well as the prospects of their strengthening. They also examined opportunities to cooperation and partnership in the field of geophysical survey for oil and gas prospecting, as well as in data, research, petroleum services, and modern technological solutions in the oil and gas industry in Algeria, in addition to CO2 capture and the training of human resources. The two parties also discussed opportunities for cooperation in the mining sector, particularly in studies and research in the fields of geology, mineral and land resources, as well as the issuing of maps, geological and geophysical bulletins and reports. During the meeting, it was agreed on the holding of meetings for the deepening of consultations and discussions between the CGG Group and Sonatrach, the National Agency for the Development of Hydrocarbon Resources, the Sonarem Group, the Agency of the Algerian Geological Service, and the National Agency for Mining Activities.
14 hours 43 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the UN Security Council is holding behind closed doors consultations on the UN mission for the organization of a referendum in Western Sahara. And the details with James Selmani.
The Council's members will listen to two reports by the Special Envoy for Western Sahara and head of the MINURSO, Alexander Ivanko, and by the Personnel Envoy of the UN Secretary-General, Staffan de Mistura. Earlier, the representative of the Polisario Front to the UN and coordinator with the MINURSO, Mohammed Sidi Omar, met with the Personnel Envoy of the UN Secretary-General for Western Sahara, Staffan de Mistura. The meeting held on the eve of the consultation session at the UN Security Council centered on the reality and future of the United Nations brokered peace process in Western Sahara. Mr. Sidi Omar notably explained in detail the position of the Polisario Front in this regard and stressed that the exercise of the Sahrawi people of their inalienable right to self-determination is the only path towards a peaceful, just and lasting solution to the decolonization of Western Sahara. The representative of the Polisario Front further reaffirmed that the settlement plan of the African Union and the United Nations adopted by the two parties to the conflict, the Polisario Front and Morocco, in August 1988 and approved unanimously by the Security Council in its resolution 658 in 1990 and 690 in 1991, remains the only realistic, reasonable and consensual solution to the question of the decolonization of Western Sahara. He also called for the UN Security Council to take concrete measures to enable the MINURSO to fully implement its mandate as specified in the UN and African Settlement Plan. Mr. Sidi Omar also renewed the willingness of the Sahrawi side to keep working with the United Nations and the African Union with the aim of achieving a peaceful, just and lasting solution to the conflict between the Sahrawi Republic and the Kingdom of Morocco in accordance with the principles of the UN Charter and the Constitutive Act of the African Union. The Sahrawi official seized the opportunity to reaffirm the strong and unwavering determination of the Sahrawi people to continue their struggle by all legitimate means, including the armed struggle, until they achieve their non-negotiable objectives of freedom, independence and sovereignty over the entire Sahrawi territory.
And to the Middle East now, more airstrikes have been carried out by the Israeli occupation against various areas of the Gaza Strip, killing and wounding scores of Palestinians. The news agency Wafa said that more than 46 people were killed and over 100 others wounded for the past 24 hours in new Israeli bombardments launched on the central and southern parts of the enclave. The Israeli occupation bombardments mainly targeted the refugee camp of Nusayrat in the central part of Gaza and southern town of Rafah. This brought to over 33,800 the number of Palestinians killed since Israel launched its all-out operations against Gaza 7 months ago. These are fears that the death toll could be higher as several bodies are still trapped under the rubble. Meanwhile, UNRWA affirmed that there were no significant change in the volume of humanitarian aid entering Gaza and neither a better access to the territory's northern part where the population is facing famine conditions. And in this connection, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs affirmed that 41% of the coordinated aid missions had been prevented from reaching Gaza's northern part. And this came as the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa called on the international community to take urgent measures to end Israel's acts of aggression on Gaza. He also called for relief efforts to be made in Gaza to put a halt to the suffering of the Palestinian population. In a similar move, several Central Asian countries and the member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council called for an immediate and lasting ceasefire in the war-torn Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi has warned that any action to be launched by the Israeli occupation against Iran's interest would cause Iran to respond severely. During a phone call with the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, he recalled that his country had exercised its right to self-defense and that the unprecedented operation was carried out successfully. The United Nations has expressed its concern regarding the resurgence of cholera in Yemen, particularly the rapid spread of the pandemic in zones controlled by the Houthis, where 11,000 cases and 75 deaths have been registered since October. During a Security Council meeting, the Director of Operations and Advocacy Division told reporters on behalf of the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths that the last pandemic was in 2019, adding that the response led by the government with the support of humanitarians in the zones controlled by the government slowed the spreading of the disease and assured that the appropriate treatments were available. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for global efforts to ensure a ceasefire in Sudan a year after the outbreak of the conflict between the two military factions, stressing that the only way out of this horror is a political solution. Guterres also called for a boost in humanitarian funding.
1 year has passed since the outbreak of conflict in Sudan, which unleashed a catalogue of horrors. A nightmare of bloodshed that has killed over 14,000 people and injured 33,000 more. Today, half of Sudan's people need emergency assistance. We cannot let this nightmare slide from view. I appeal to the generosity of donors to step up their contributions and support these life-saving efforts. We also call on all parties to protect civilians and ensure full humanitarian access. I pledge the full support of the United Nations. My personal envoy, Mr. Ramtan Lamamra, is totally engaged in this effort. We will work shoulder to shoulder with all of you to end this nightmare. It's time to support the Sudanese people. It's time to silence the guns. It's time for peace in Sudan.
Let's recall that yesterday more than 840 million euros of aid to Sudan was announced at the International Humanitarian Conference held in Paris. And Algeria is celebrating today the Knowledge Day in light of the major reforms in the national education and the higher education sectors, which promoted the role of the teacher and made of the preservation of his dignity a priority for the state. On the occasion, the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, expressed several times his great consideration for teachers, whom he described as the bearers of responsibility of educating youth in the nationalist spirit, recommending to meet their needs, enhance their status, and improve the quality of education system, bearing in mind that teachers are educators before civil servants. Let's recall that during the last 5 years, the President of the Republic took major decisions which translated his particular interest to education, greatly contributing in improving the socio-professional conditions of workers of the sector. And on this occasion, here's a special program on Knowledge Day compiled and presented by Mohammed Barzwan.